The young and the restless spoilers. Kyle Abbott could feel his pulse echoing in his ears the moment Claire Newman's phone buzzed with an email notification. They were standing side by side in the quiet of the Jabot conference room, a space usually filled with the hum of printers and whispered boardroom gossip, when Claire's clinical detachment crumbled into a gasp. Her fingers trembled as she opened the attachment, and the spreadsheet of merger projections faded into a black and white ultrasound image, a tiny heartbeat pulsing on the screen, cocooned in layers of shadow and light. Time slowed. Kyle watched her face drain of color, her eyes widening until they seemed to contain all of Genoa City's sorrow. He knew, in that instant, that the universe had shifted on its axis and the ground had crumbled beneath his feet. "Claire," he breathed, moving toward her, but she held up one hand, pale, rigid, like a white flag. Her lips quivered, and tears began to carve new paths down her cheeks. She stared at the image as if it had betrayed her deepest secrets. "How, when," she started, voice thick with grief. The words caught in her throat. Kyle could see the betrayal etched in every line of her face, the woman he loved discovering that her fiancé had carried on a secret that would change everything. Behind her, almost silently, Audra Charles appeared at the conference room's entrance. Dressed in a tailored cream jacket, her expression was a mask of sympathy, soft eyes, a gentle tilt of the head, while in her hand she held a slim manila envelope. Inside, Kyle knew, were messages he had sent in the heat of a late-night tryst, cruelly intimate snapshots of a rendezvous he now detested, proof that he and Audra had crossed every line. Audra had orchestrated this entire moment, savoring it like a chess master savoring the moment before checkmate. Claire clutched the ultrasound printout in both hands as though it were a fragile shard of glass. Her breaths came in jagged sobs. "I hate Kyle," she whispered, and the world seemed to shrink to just them, her pain, his guilt, the uninvited hush of corporate walls around them. She peeled her grip from the print, letting it flutter to the tabletop like a wounded bird. Then, with sudden fury born of heartbreak, she tore the image in half, shredding the evidence of new life into confetti of loss. Kyle pressed forward, voice cracking. "Claire, please, but she shook her head, her tears now matching his own. He pivoted, seeing the envelope that spilled its contents across the glittering mahogany surface, lewd messages, photos, a message thread he had thought erased. Audra's handwriting was on the topmost note, "You owe me. You belong to me now." He realized with sickening clarity that Audra had recorded every intimate detail, and now held his reputation, and his heart, ransom. Audra stepped lightly into the room, her shoes clicking on polished wood. "Claire," she said, voice honeyed. "I'm so sorry you had to learn this way." She looked at Kyle, then back at Claire, eyes glittering with triumph. "But I need you to understand, I'm pregnant." She spread one hand over her own abdomen, the gesture calculated for maximum impact. "This is my responsibility. Kyle will do the right thing." Claire's chest heaved as she stared down at Audra's hand, as if trying to comprehend the transformation from colleague to adversary. "You did this on purpose," she accused, voice choking. "You used me, to trap him." Audra inclined her head, lips curling into a delicate smile. "I'm not ashamed of my methods," she murmured. "Kyle made choices. He should stand by them." She extended the envelope toward Claire. "I've included everything. I suggest you walk away, Claire. Disappear. He's mine now." Silence fell, broken only by Claire's ragged sobs. Then, with grim determination, Claire swept the scattered ultrasound fragments into her trembling hand and pressed them to her mouth in a tragic salute to what might have been. She crumpled to her knees, tears blinding her, leaving the shredded evidence of her heartbreak at her feet. The merger projections, the corporate charts. They all lay forgotten under Claire's collapse. Kyle sank beside her, guilt and helplessness warring in his chest. He reached for her hand, but she slid away, from him, from Audra, from the world they all inhabited. He tried to speak, his voice nothing more than a strangled plea, "Claire, I never meant for any of this. I'm so sorry." But the words caught on his tongue. He turned to Audra, fury igniting in his core. "You monster," he spat, voice hoarse. "You manipulated me, humiliated me. Humiliated us." Audra raised a slender hand, her rings flashing like icy flames. "This is reality, Kyle. You made the bed. Now lie in it." She pivoted on her heel and glided toward the door, pausing only to add, "Your honor was never part of your plan, was it?" Then she vanished into the hallway, leaving Kyle alone with his shattered world. In the stunned hush that followed, Kyle's guilt metamorphosed into desperation. He knelt beside Claire, gathering her into his arms even as she recoiled. "Please," he whispered, tears staining his collar. "Please look at me. I will fix this, whatever it takes." But Claire pressed her face into his chest, nails digging into his suit sleeve. Her shoulders trembled with heartbreak so profound it seemed to fracture the very air. He felt the weight of her sorrow like a physical blow. His own tears fell freely as he realized how completely he had failed her. He had chased ambition and desire into betrayal. He had allowed Audra's seduction and calculation to blind him to the bond he held with Claire. And now, as she wept without him, he stood faceless in the ruins of their love. When Claire finally lifted her head, her eyes were red-rimmed but defiant. She pushed away, wiping sweat and tears from her cheeks. "I don't want your apologies, Kyle," she said, voice thick. "I don't want your pity. I need time away from you, away from everything." She rose unsteadily, smoothing her skirt, each movement a testament to the quiet dignity she still clung to. "I'm going home." She swiped another tissue across her face and swept past him into the corridor. Kyle watched her go, the echo of her heels like a coffin lid closing on his heart. He sank to the floor, letting his head fall into his hands, the gravest consequence of his actions pressing down on him like an anchor. Beyond the conference room door, the corporate machinery of Jabot carried on, oblivious to the wreckage in its midst. But for Kyle Abbott, nothing would ever be the same. Audra had seized his secrets and turned them into weapons. Claire had lost her trust in him, perhaps forever. And the child, Audra's child, loomed on the horizon like a storm cloud that would define every choice he would ever make. As the minutes ticked by, the desperation in Kyle's tears crystallized into resolve. He stood, brushing shards of shredded ultrasound off his trousers, and pressed his palms against the smooth wall. He closed his eyes, imagining Claire's fierce, heartbreak-wrought gaze and the tiny heartbeat that had flashed on the screen. There was only one path forward. He would find a way to protect that child from Audra's merciless ambitions. He would fight against corporate titans, against his own mistakes, to prove that he could be the man Claire deserved. And if he failed, he would bear the consequence of a love he had betrayed, the weight of a future he might never earn. In that quiet corridor, Kyle Abbott made a vow to confront Audra, to win back Claire's trust, and to shield a new life from the venomous games of ambition. He knew the road ahead would be treacherous, lined with the shards of his own guilt and shame. But as he swallowed his tears and squared his shoulders, he pledged that he would face the storm he had unleashed. And emerge, somehow, worthy of forgiveness and redemption. Claire's fingers trembled as she pressed the crumpled ultrasound printout against her palm, the jagged edges cutting softly into her skin. She held the torn fragments up, eyes blazing with defiance as she met Audra's steely gaze across the hushed conference room. "I don't believe it," she said, voice resonant with conviction. Her tone softened only for a heartbeat. "I refuse to accept that this graphic proof of your manipulation is real." Then, with a sudden, decisive motion, she flung the shredded paper to the floor, where the pieces drifted like fallen snowflakes across the mahogany table. Audra's lips parted in shock. She had expected anger, perhaps tears, an outburst of grief, but not this. Not the fierce calm in Claire's eyes, the set of her shoulders, the way her chin quivered not with fear but with resolve. Claire stepped forward, each stride measured and sure, closing the distance until only inches separated them. "You think that child gives you power over me," Claire continued, voice unwavering. You think you can trap me in a loveless triangle with Kyle, leverage my compassion to hurt us both. But you've underestimated me. Audra lifted one manicured brow. Underestimated? I have the proof of his betrayal, Claire. He's been with me, he has responsibilities now, obligations to our child. You can't just erase that. At that, Claire shook her head slowly. I can. Because you are not the mother of my child, if it even exists. If you decide to carry this pregnancy to term, fine. Kyle will provide for it, he will take responsibility for a life he brought into the world, and I will not stand in his way. But that does not involve me. She gestured broadly, as if the walls themselves belonged to her. This, Claire said, her voice gathering strength, is over. Between you and me, and between you and him. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to settle into Audra's pallid features. Audra's carefully crafted mask faltered. She opened her mouth, closed it again uncertainly. The air between them crackled with silent challenge, two women bound by betrayal, each standing for everything the other was not. For Audra, the stakes had always been power and survival, another notch in her belt, another devastation to her enemies. For Claire, the stakes were her self-respect, her dignity, the remnants of a love she had once believed unbreakable. Claire took a step back, turning her gaze toward the door where Kyle still stood, a conflicted figure caught between his past infidelity and the woman he still loved. She had fought to forgive him before, had sewn back together the frayed edges of their relationship with patience and hope. But this time felt different. Kyle, she called, voice softer now but still carrying across the silent room. He approached, his face etched with guilt and yearning. She reached for his hand, entwining their fingers in a gesture of connection. I stayed, she told him, her eyes glistening, because I believed in us. Because I believed you would choose me. She paused, tears leaking free as she faced him squarely. But now, I need you to understand that my love is not a rope to bind me to pain. I will wait for you to decide who you are choosing, the consequences of your actions, or the woman who still stands here. Claire's voice cracked on the final words, but she held her ground, unwavering in her demand for closure. Kyle's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He knelt before her as though she were the queen of his broken world. Claire, his voice faltered. He looked to Audra, who stood trembling, no longer triumphant but trapped by her own gambit. Audra's face was pale, eyes downcast, as if Claire's words had pierced through her armor. Michael's words echoed in Kyle's mind, there will always be consequences. Now, he faced the starkest one of all. Audra's pregnancy, if real or not, would alter the course of his life, but his heart still belonged to Claire. He sensed the desperation in her stance, she would wait for him, but she would not chase him. She was, at once, both vulnerable and unbreakable. A paradox that terrified him and filled him with awe. He rose, lifting Claire's hand to his lips and pressing a trembling kiss to her knuckles. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never meant to hurt you. His gaze flicked to Audra, who seemed to shrink under his remorse. But I also carry this burden, he gestured at the shredded fragments strewn across the floor, and I have to face it. Not to win some victory over you, Audra, but to do right by everyone involved. He took a deep breath, turning back to Claire with fierce resolve. Claire, I choose you. I choose us. But I have to make this right, in whatever way I can. A hush fell across the room. Claire's tears caught the light as she studied him, her own expression a tapestry of hope and heartbreak. In that moment, she realized that love, no matter how profound, could not erase the past, but it could shape the future. And she knew, deep in her bones, that her patience had limits. Kyle's promise was precious, but if he wavered again, she would no longer stand by. Claire stepped into his arms, leaning her head against his chest. I believe you, she murmured, voice barely audible. But know this, I will not beg for what is mine. If you stray, I will walk away. She lifted her chin, lifting the weight of her heart off his shoulders. Now choose. Prove that your love is stronger than your mistakes. Kyle closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to hers, forging an unspoken covenant. I will prove it, he vowed. I'll face everything, Audra, the baby, the fallout, so that I can deserve you again. I swear it. Audra, standing at the threshold of their reconciliation, felt the last of her triumph slip away. She folded her arms, her pregnancy looming like an unanswered question between them, her power waning in the presence of genuine love. She realized, at last, that she had overplayed her hand. Claire's sudden steel had shattered every expectation, and Kyle's choice was no longer a given. With a soft sigh, Audra turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she exited the chamber of judgment she herself had orchestrated. Behind her, the door closed with a weighty finality, reverberating through the hearts of the two who remained. In the aftermath, Kyle held Claire a little tighter, breathing in the sweetness of her presence. She laid her cheek against his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart she once feared lost. Together, they stood beside the ruins of past betrayals and the promise of new beginnings. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, inevitable crises, lingering doubts, the specter of a life he had almost abandoned, but for now, they had reclaimed their love from the abyss. And in that reclaimed love, Claire found a surge of hope strong enough to outshine her despair. She knew her faith would be tested, but in Kyle's arms, she felt certain that some mistakes, born on a backdrop of regret and contrition, could be forgiven, and that, perhaps, the most powerful act of love was the courage to trust again.